I just knew that I was going to get robbed. Is Mexico City safe to travel solo? I'm going to share the top 10 things you need to know about traveling Mexico City. Hey, it's Sarah. I've lived in Mexico for 10 years and I am your guide to authentic travel and experience in Mexico. Be sure to grab my Explore Mexico City cheat sheet down below. Is Mexico City safe to travel alone? I've traveled to Mexico City alone several times, and my answer to that question is a definitive yes, if you know where you're going, you've planned it out carefully, and you're sticking to the areas that are safe. We're going to get into where you should avoid in just a second, but here are a couple of main tips I have for you as a solo traveler in Mexico City. First of all, just like any large city, you need to be a little bit street smart, okay? Number one thing I want you to do is please pay attention constantly to your surroundings. Pro tip, if you're using your keys, for example, to get into a car, into your house, into your Airbnb, I want you to turn your back to the wall as you're fishing your keys out of your purse or pocket. None of this looking down into your purse with your back toward all the people, not paying attention and digging your keys out. You always need to be paying attention to what's going on around you in Mexico City. And if you're distracted, I need you to have your back to a wall or a space where no one can walk behind you. That way, no one can come up behind you and surprise you. Our second question is, can you walk around Mexico City safely? And the answer, once again, is a definitive yes. Mexico City is a very walkable city. Just like much of the country, it's designed with walking in mind. Now, I will say that the sidewalks in a lot of the country are pretty horrible. In fact, there's even memes and jokes on the internet about how using the sidewalk in parts of Mexico is kind of like a video game because you're always having to dodge things like, for example, poles. They put electric poles like right in the middle of the sidewalk. It seems like there's no standard for the size of the sidewalk, so it can be super small. I kid you not, like your foot can't even fit on it. Or it can be perfectly large. There's always, especially in the center of Mexico City, there's people, there's dollies, there's cars, there's motorcycles driving where they're not supposed to. So in that aspect, you do always need to be a little bit more alert. But once again, this applies to exactly where are you in Mexico City. If you're going to be in Polanco or generally on the western side of the city, it's going to be a nicer, ritzier, more expensive area. And so the sidewalks are going to be better. You're going to have more public walking space. But if you're going to be more maybe in the historic downtown area or over toward the east of the city, I don't know why you would be in the east of the city because there's really nothing to see there for tourists, but just in case you're there. Then these are more residential areas for people that are not as well-to-do, and so the sidewalks just aren't as nice. Also, of course, when we want to talk about safety, you're going to think about crime. Crime is a thing in Mexico, just like it is in any other place in the world. If you are a fan of some of those really popular TV shows, Netflix shows about the drug lords and the narcos in Mexico, that doesn't really exist in Mexico City. I'm not saying there's not drugs. There's definitely drugs, just like any other place in Mexico. But you don't have these drug wars in Mexico City itself. Mexico City has a lot more security. My personal theory is because the president lives in Mexico City, and so they're more serious about security and safety in Mexico City. So you don't have to worry about narcos in Mexico City. Have I personally ever felt unsafe in Mexico City? Yes, of course I have. But you know where else I felt unsafe? Baltimore, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Okay, no one on the face of the earth has ever felt unsafe in Hershey, Pennsylvania. That was a joke. You should visit Hershey. It's a nice place. But I digress. This video is not about Hershey. This video is about Mexico City. Yeah, I felt unsafe in Mexico City sometimes. Everybody does at some point, right? But I've felt unsafe in many places, like I have said. The whole world has places that are unsafe. It's not just Mexico. It's not just Latin America. As long as you're smart, you'll be fine in Mexico City. By the way, that little story at the beginning where I said I just knew I was going to get robbed, I was pretty convinced I was going to get robbed. But I didn't. There was a shady looking fella standing on a street where we were the only two people. And I went to pass him, absolutely certain that I was going to get robbed. I guess that was a little bit of prejudice on my part. And so I started speaking to him in a nice and friendly way. And you know what? He was actually a really nice guy. Even though I was convinced I was going to be robbed, I wasn't. To be fair, he did tell me that he was waiting on some fellas that had previously robbed him so that he could repay them in kind. But he was very friendly and nice to me. So, even the Mexicans that look a little shady are usually nice as long as you're friendly. Where should you avoid in Mexico City? This is really, really important. Number one place I want you to avoid, listen up, if you get nothing else out of this video, this is important. If you're going to be alone traveling in Mexico City, avoid Tepito and Lagunilla. Please notice I said if you are going to be alone or if you're going to be in a group of non-Mexicans. Tepito and Lagunilla is a humongous outdoor market where you can buy anything from slippers to giant stuffed animals. And if you're looking for cheap goods, it's kind of cool. But that's what makes it such a dangerous place. People from all over the country flock to Tepito to go shopping, and that means they bring money. Side note, this is a symbol for Mexicans when they're talking about money. Ignore the Band-Aid on my finger. So the people flocking to Tepito are bringing money to go shopping, and that's what makes it dangerous. It's a hot spot for criminals to target people to rob. If you do choose to go to Tepito, I personally have gone to Tepito, you need to go with a local Mexican. And I don't mean a big group of foreigners going with a Mexican guide to Tepito. No, you're drawing too much attention. You need to go to Tepito with one, if you're one foreigner, go to Tepito with a Mexican or a group of Mexicans. That way you're not going to stick out so much. I personally have gone to Tepito many times, and I've never had any problems, but I have followed these precautions. If you're wondering what side of Mexico City you should stick to and where exactly is Tepito so you can avoid it like the plague, grab my Explore Mexico City cheat sheet down below. This cheat sheet actually has a map of the metro, and I've circled the areas that you should stick to as a visitor of Mexico City. And I've marked Tepito with a big red X. What are the best quick ways to get around Mexico City? I'm definitely going to recommend public transportation, but wait! Don't go anywhere yet. Specific types of public transportation to stay safe. The two types of public transportation that you should definitely use are the metro and the metro bus. Metro and metro bus. If you want to know how to use those, check out the video up in the cards. I've actually got two separate videos for the metro and the metro bus. But of course, check them out after you watch this one. The metro and the metro bus are public transportation, and so some people have actually argued with me a little bit, saying that they wouldn't recommend these for foreigners. I still disagree. I'm a foreigner. I've been in Mexico for years. I started using the metro literally my first week that I was visiting Mexico City. It is very easy to understand, and it is very secure because of the presence of police in every single metro station. If someone is going to harm you on the metro, they have nowhere to go to escape. And as soon as those doors open, there's a policeman there to help you. Quick story, I actually saw something like this go down the other day. As my husband and I were exiting the metro, we saw a big commotion outside on the platform. A gentleman had grabbed a thief, had him holding him by his neck. No, his shirt, not his neck, and was dragging him to the police and screaming that he had stolen something from him. And the policeman was right there. So even in the event that you get pickpocketed, the police are right there. And there's no such thing as violent crime on the metro. The ending to that story, I actually don't know. We got out of there as fast as possible. That's another good tip for you. If you do see something going down, don't stick around to watch. Just leave as fast as you can. If you're wondering about any more of my safety tips for the metro, once again, check out that video up in the cards. I have very specific information on using the metro in Mexico City for you. I teach you how to use it. I teach you how to get your public transportation card. I teach you extra tips for safety, even as a solo traveler. So make sure you check it out. Is Mexico City safe for women traveling solo? I have been a woman traveling solo around Mexico City many a time, and I have to tell you, it's one of the most fun things I've ever done. One of the things I used to do a lot when I was single, and my favorite things was to just get on the metro and go into the city center and explore on my own. It's so exciting, and Mexico City is always an adventure, and I strongly encourage you to do it. I've been, for example, on public transportation many a time alone, struggling with heavy suitcases, and it never fails that there is always a stranger Mexican man that comes to help me carry my suitcase up the stairs. This is much appreciated. Sometimes I have had 50-pound suitcases lugging them up 30 to 50 stairs, and I've really appreciated the help and the gentlemanly effort of the random Mexican man that I've met. So I would say, as a solo lady traveler in Mexico, I've always felt very, very comfortable. Also, did you know if you choose to take the Metro bus and the Metro, there are specific spaces set aside only for ladies? Well, ladies, people with disabilities, or children. So if you feel a little bit uncomfortable as a woman traveling solo, there are specific specific spaces set aside just for you so that you can feel a little bit more comfortable on public transportation. Do you need some Spanish classes to help you get ready for your trip to Mexico? Visit senorsarasclassroom.com to book a Spanish class with a native speaker today, or check it out in the link in the description below. That brings us to our next thing, a couple of tips for using public transportation in Mexico City. The number one tip I would say for you is I strongly encourage you to stick to the Metro or the Metro bus. There are many more buses in Mexico City, the city buses, but I do not encourage you to use those as a foreigner unless you have a guide with you that speaks Spanish and lives in Mexico City and knows how to get around. The other city buses can be a little bit confusing, and you actually have to tell the driver where you want to get off. Sometimes it can be super packed, a little bit difficult to even see out the window to see where you're going. So that can be a little bit difficult, overwhelming, and easy to get lost as a visitor to Mexico City. There are a couple other types of public transportation that you can use as a visitor to Mexico City. For example, the trolley bus, that's an electric bus that has set stops. The cablebus, the cable cars, those are very nice to use as foreigners and easy to navigate, but they don't really get you to any of the main spots that I would recommend that you visit in Mexico City. But they're perfectly safe, easy to navigate, and you only need one transportation card to use: the Metro bus, the Metro, the trolleybus, the trolley bus, or the cable cars, the cablebus. So if you want to try them out, go ahead. I strongly discourage you from using what Mexicans call combis. Combis are little Volkswagen vans. They look like very tiny buses that get you usually outside of Mexico City. I would say, if you're listening to me today, do not use these. I actually refuse to use them because they are absolutely notorious for people getting on and robbing everyone at gunpoint. I know friends that have had this happen to them. Thankfully, they were not harmed during this unfortunate event, but I will never ever use those. Now, if you're sticking inside Mexico City, there's no reason you'll ever need to use these. These are little vans that take you outside of the city. You really shouldn't need to use them anyway. Do you want regular tips and information about Mexico City so you know how to get around, what to do, where to go? Make sure you follow me on Instagram at senora.sarah. Next common question I hear about Mexico City is, can you get around Mexico City without knowing Spanish? This is a hard question to answer. I'm going to say technically yes, but your experience is going to be way lower quality than if you did speak Spanish or had a guide with you that speaks Spanish. Mexico City is a huge metropolis. There are 9 million or so people living in the city, and in the greater metro area, there's approximately 23 million people in the area. It's the largest city in North America and one of the largest cities on Earth. There's a lot of people in the city that learn English for work or even just travel, and they're quite used to the influence of foreigners and tourists and different people visiting, right? However, in my experience, the majority of people don't speak English well enough for you to be able to get around on your own. Remember, on this channel, I recommend authentic experience and travel in Mexico. And you're not going to get that if you don't speak Spanish. Part of the beauty of coming to Mexico is getting to know the people and getting to have those conversations, make those connections, and experience what the country has to offer as far as culture, food, the artisan goods, the history, the art. You can't experience those things for real unless you speak Spanish or have a guide that speaks Spanish. And you especially are not really going to be able to navigate on your own as far as even purchasing a taco unless you know how to do that. So, can you get around Mexico City on your own without speaking Spanish? Yes, but you're going to struggle. Do you need a guide to help you navigate Mexico City? Check out senorsarasclassroom.com to check out tour packages and interpreting services for your trip to Mexico City. How much does a meal cost in Mexico City? Once again, this is the great it depends. It greatly depends on where you want to go and what you want to eat. I would say budget between 100 and 200 pesos for the average sit-down meal in Mexico City. 100 and 200 pesos is currently approximately 5 to 10 US dollars per person. You can eat for much cheaper than that, especially if you go for street food, which we'll talk about in a second. And of course, you can eat much more expensive than that. If you want to go to a really nice, ritzy place in Polanco, you're going to spend way above that. If you budget between 5 and 10 US dollars for most of your meals in Mexico City, you should be absolutely fine and maybe have a little extra spending money. This leads us into the question about street food. Can Americans eat street food in Mexico City without getting sick? Yeah, but you should be careful when you're eating street food. Personally, I don't eat street food a lot because I have a couple of tummy trouble issues. We don't need to get into my personal gut health issues, but I don't eat a lot of street food, and there's a lot of Mexicans even that won't eat a lot of street food. It is famed for not being as clean as restaurants. But sidebar, I've also been served raw chicken at a Sanborn's Cafe. If you want to hear that story, check out my video about what to do in 24 hours in Mexico City, coming soon. So if you want to venture out to try some street food in Mexico City, which I think you absolutely should, how can you determine what will probably not get you sick? Here's a couple of things to look out for. You should go to a busy street food stall. That means the food is turning over quickly and they're not going to have it just sitting out in the Mexico City heat. I've personally never gotten deathly ill on street food in Mexico City, but I have gotten a little bit of something going on. One of my best tips for that is to have tea. Mexicans love to use tea for mild stomach issues. I encourage you to carry around a couple little packets in your backpack of chamomile or ginger tea. If you want to know how to get that, chamomile is manzanilla and ginger is jengibre. Bonus tip, if you can get your hands on hinojo fennel tea, that's really, really helpful if you have a little stomach trouble. Please remember, I'm not a doctor, and the teas are definitely not intended to cure a serious illness that you have, but if you just have a little bit of tummy upset, a little bit of pain going on, these teas really help. What are some of the most popular foods in Mexico City? I've got one phrase for you, and that is vitamina T. That's vitamin T. That's the local phrase to talk about tortas, tacos, tamales, tlayudas. Everything that starts with T is one of the most popular foods in Mexico City. Are they healthy? No, but you're on vacation. You're not trying to be healthy. If you want to know more about some of the most popular foods in Mexico, grab that Explore Mexico City cheat sheet down below. I've actually got a list of some of the most popular foods that I recommend that you try, so you can actually see the word written out so you don't forget it. So now you understand the top 10 things you have to know about traveling Mexico City. Be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and share if you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hasta luego!